BDPA is a nonprofit organization dedicated to the professional and personal development of African Americans who have an interest in information technology and related fields. Our aim is to mentor and develop minorities from the classroom to the boardroom. Today, I have the privilege and honor to sit down with royalty. If we were together in person, I'd probably be requesting an autograph. When the mention of this conversation was brought my way, I immediately responded, "This is way above my pay grade." When I tell you we have a phenomenal woman in our presence today, it's an understatement. I'm just simply elated to be chatting with none other than Miss Carla Harris. Welcome to the chat, Miss Harris.
Well, thank you very much, Victor, for having me. And I'm elated and excited to be having this conversation with you.
Awesome, awesome. And I'm going to provide Carla's bio in a moment, but I just want to take a little bit of time, just a slight bit, to fan out a little bit.
Oh,
I first became aware of Miss Harris in about 2007, 2008. A video of one of her talks was circulating amongst my company, and many people were referencing the many nuggets that she shared, and there were a lot. The power of her voice was captivating, and her knowledge, I tell you, her knowledge and ease of conveying complex messages in a simple manner was just simply unmatched. She is definitely a force to be reckoned with. And if I don't jump into this bio right now, we're going to start having Zoom church. So let me go ahead and jump into the bio. Carla Harris is a vice chairman, managing director, and senior client advisor at Morgan Stanley. She was most recently as a vice chairman responsible for increasing client connectivity and penetration to enhance revenue generation across the firm. For more than a decade, Ms. Harris was a senior member of the equity syndicate desk and executed such transactions as initial public offerings for UPS, Martha Stewart Living, Omni Media, Ariba, Redback, the General Motors sub IPO of Delphi Automotive, in the 3.2 billion, all right, let me say it again, 3.2 billion common stock transaction for Immunex Corporation, one of the largest biotechnology common stock transactions in US history. Ms. Harris was named to Fortune magazine's list of the 50 most powerful Black executives in corporate America, Fortune's most influential list, US Banker's top 25 most powerful women in finance in 2009, 2010, and 2011, Black Enterprise's top 75 most powerful women in business, and top 75 African Americans on Wall Street, into Essence Magazine's list of the 50 women who are shaping the world, Ebony's list of the Power 100 and 15 corporate women at the top, and was named Woman of the Year 2004 by the Harvard Black Men's Forum and 2011 by Yale Black Men's Forum. Ms. Harris's accolades go on and on. MBA from Harvard, author, and accomplished singer. And guess what? I have the pleasure of having a conversation with her today. So let's give a BDPA hand clap to Ms. Harris today. I am extremely, extremely, extremely excited. So with that, Ms. Harris, we have a short time, but we want to try to cram in as much as we can. And I know through our pre-conversation, you're open and transparent about sharing whatever it is that can, help out our folks, help out those that watch this broadcast and listen to the message, just progress in whatever avenue of life they're on. And as I mentioned in our intro for BDPA, BDPA is targeting advancing minorities from the classroom to the boardroom. So with that classroom piece as a backdrop, tell us a little bit about your childhood.
Yes. Well, thanks again, Victor, for having me. And as I said, I'm delighted to be having this conversation with you and the broader BDPA audience. I grew up in Jacksonville, Florida. I am a product of Catholic schools from kindergarten to 12th grade. I went to Bishop Kenny High School for my high school time, and St. Pius for my grade school and junior high. And I grew up in what, you know, some might call a lower middle class, some might call a low class environment, but never, you know, sort of felt like I was deprived of anything. And my parents, my father was a captain of a commercial fishing vessel. My mother was a school teacher in the Duval County school system. And both of them made me feel like I was supposed to do well. So what I think I look back and I think was critical is that they didn't make me feel like I was anything extraordinary or special, or I was extra smart or smarter than other people, but they did make me feel like I was very smart and I was supposed to get A's, so that there was nothing extraordinary about that. So I should always be pressing for the top of whatever it is I was going for. And I will tell you that that has translated into who Carla Harris is as a professional. So as soon as I started my career, it was the pursuit of how do I get to the top of the class? As you know, investment bankers get paid in a range. In the first couple of years, pretty much everybody gets paid around the same amount. But by the time you get to the third year, there's some clear differentiation. And your pay, your compensation is frankly your salary and a bonus, but most of the value is in the bonus. So that's what you're playing for every year. So kind of understanding what it took to get to the top of that bonus structure, you know, how subjective it was, and still always having this pursuit of excellence, if you will, which I would have to say I got from my parents. And the other person that influenced me a lot as I was growing up was my grandmother, who ran a very successful tavern on the east side of Jacksonville. And she was the first female entrepreneur that I knew, first Black female entrepreneur that I knew. And when I try to connect the dots between my growing up and who Carla Harris is today, one of the pearls, as you know, as I like to call them, my hard-earned and hard-learned pearls, one of the pearls I talk about, and it is the first chapter of my first book, Authenticity. I look back and I can trace it back to Miss Emma, you know, the entrepreneur who was extremely successful on the east side of Florida Avenue, because she was always herself. And that was one of the things that I think really drew her customers in. And sometimes she could be really harsh, the way she talked to them. And I remember thinking, ooh, grandmama, wow, ooh, that was harsh. But they'd come right back in the next day. Because at the end of the day, that authenticity is what made her customers trust her. And when I think about investment banking and Wall Street, you know, there are a lot of clients that use Wall Street bankers, but they have a little bit of a mistrust of them. But guess what? I don't look like a Wall Street banker, right? And that ended up being a great asset. And the fact that I always bring the real Carla into any situation, that also gave me the ability to get clients to trust me and trust me quickly, especially with large transactions like the one you talked about. So I just wanted to connect the dots for our audience between Carla, the little girl who grew up in Jacksonville, Florida, at very, very modest means, and Carla, the Wall Street banker. They're still very much the same woman, more educated, more refined, but very much the same woman.
Definitely, definitely. And we're going to circle back to some of those jewels that have contributed to the overall person, Carla Harris, because I know there's a lot that you have to offer there. But looking at Wall Street, over 3 decades on Wall Street as an African American woman, whew, that's interesting enough. Please walk us through that experience.
Sure. I'll tell you the biggest aha for me, and it was an amazing journey. So let me start there. I have learned a lot over my 34, now 35 years on the street. And it's been a constant education. And frankly, that's one of the reasons I chose finance, because it's a very dynamic, fast-paced, competitive environment. So you can't help but learn, especially if you want to maintain a level of excellence and you want to play on the field. You know, you have to keep up. You have to keep learning. There has to be a natural curiosity. You need to be self-aware so you can pick up, you know, your own cues out of every situation that you find yourself in. So it's been a fascinating career that has allowed me the opportunity to add something every day to my intellectual and my experiential tool chest. But I will tell you, the journey wasn't easy, Victor, because there were things that I did not know. When I was at Harvard Business School, every company in every industry that came to recruit sold a meritocracy. Oh, our organization is a meritocracy. All you have to do is be smart and work hard, and you can go right to the top. Well, it didn't take me very long before I realized that that was an incomplete success equation. Oh, I was pretty smart, as we just talked about. You know, Harvard undergrad, magna cum laude, Harvard Business School, second year honors. Okay, pretty smart. I'm from the South. Like I said, I'm from Jacksonville. So I have a pretty strong work ethic. Even today, 35 years into it, you cannot outwork Carla Harris. You cannot outwork Carla Harris. But the combination of those two did not equal maximizing my success. So I realized that there was something missing in the success equation. And those are the pearls that I write about in my first book, Expect to Win. So that's what made the journey hard, Victor, that there were so many things I didn't know. And I took the meritocratic argument, black and white, either it's right or it's not, as something that was gospel, but it wasn't. You needed to understand the power of relationships. You cannot do it on your own. Building relationships in your work environment is critical to being able to maximize your success. Perception is the co-pilot to reality, which is probably the most important pearl that I learned. How people perceive you will impact how they deal with you. But the understanding that you need to have is you can train people to think about you in the way that you want them to think about you. And we can talk about that a little bit more. I had to learn the power of authenticity because, again, when you walk into these large corporations, the temptation is to look around and say, well, you know, my first couple of situations didn't go well, so maybe I should speak like Victor, or maybe I should present like Bill, or maybe. So immediately you start thinking you need to speak or act or behave in a way that is inauthentic. Now, it's perfectly fine if you like the way Victor presents. It's perfectly fine for you to say, I like that. That was really effective with the client. I'm going to see if I can incorporate some of those tools into my own tool chest in a way that is authentic to me. But that doesn't mean I have to be like Victor, right? There's a very big difference that I think we often lose. And I didn't realize it at the beginning either until I realized the way Carla executes on those tools or those strategies is unique to Carla. And that's what gives Carla the edge because I'm bringing the real Carla into a client relationship or a colleague relationship. And that is what gives you the power to own that relationship in a way that nobody else can. And so those were some of the things, just a few of the pearls that I learned along the way that were frankly hard earned because there was nobody to give me the playbook, which is why I wrote the book, Expect to Win, so other people wouldn't have to figure it out. They could learn from my experiences and take the pearls and put them in their own tool chest.
Awesome, awesome. And we're definitely going to circle back to being tough. And I think that kind of also goes into the next question about being the first,
Yeah.
right? So walk us through what that piece was like. So not only were you African American, but being the first on Wall Street as a woman, and then you accompany that with the perception of you, and
Mhm.
definitely elaborate on what it means to be tough.
Yes. Okay. So first of all, there were other women of color that were at other firms on the street, and there were a few women of color that were at Morgan Stanley. So I wouldn't say I was the first woman of color, but certainly one of the first to get to the heights that I've gotten to, and certainly the first to be the first black woman to be on Morgan Stanley's management committee, and at the vice chairman level, and so on. So I just wanted to make sure that we had that because there were certainly women before me whose shoulders I was trying to climb up on or whose coattails I was trying to hold on to as well. But here's what I want to say about being the first and the only. Because sometimes, Victor, we are a little bit uncomfortable or even intimidated by being the only one that looks like us in the room, right? Well, here's what I have to say about that. If you're the only one that looks like you in that room, you're the only one that looks like you in that room. It is an asset. It is not a liability. If you're the only person that looks like you in the room, whether you're the only woman or the only person of color, then you don't have to fight for attention. Everybody sees you, and everybody's waiting to hear what you have to say. And here's the confidence that you need to have. The fact that you are in that room means you are qualified to be in that room. So you don't need to question that, or you don't need to think, well, somebody's setting me up. I'm not really ready. No, Nobody's going to spend the currency making sure you get in that room if they don't already have the confidence that you can do it. So now all you need to do is to deliver your excellence into that opportunity. And you already have it. That's why you're in there. So don't feel, like you're not supposed to be there or have the imposter syndrome. And once I started realizing that it was an advantage for me to be in the room, oh, it was game on then, Victor. It was okay, I'm here. So let me show you who Carla Harris is. Let me show you how I represent my firm. Let me give you my best. Now, you may not like it, but I'm going to be bringing my best. It is your prerogative not to embrace or accept that, but I'm going to give you my best. That's my job to do. So again, once I started reframing that and looking at it at a different lens, through a different lens, that took all the intimidation out of being the first and the only in the room. Now let's talk about the tough story. I had a senior managing director say to me one day, you're smart, you work hard, but I don't think you're tough enough for this business. Now, my first reaction, Victor, was, what is he smoking? Right? You can call Carla Harris a lot of things, but ain't tough ain't one of them. But then I realized, I said, wait a minute, suppose he's not pulling my leg. Suppose he really doesn't think that I'm tough enough for this business. And heaven forbid, suppose the rest of the organization doesn't think that I'm tough enough for this business. And as you know, the last thing you want to be thought of as a woman, and a woman on Wall Street, is not tough. And here's the more important point. I always thought of myself as tough. So the fact that he was questioning whether or not I was tough enough was a wake-up call to me that somewhere the real Carla Harris was no longer walking into Morgan Stanley. Somewhere I had lost my voice. Somewhere I'd lost my confidence. And now it was manifesting itself in a way that I was showing up every day as not tough enough to do the business. So I decided that it was time for a reset, a regroup. And the way that I could get myself back in that space is I said, I'm going to walk tough, talk tough, eat tough, drink tough, use tough in my language. Because it's important that if you want to train people to think about you in a certain way, you must have consistent behavior around those three adjectives. And you must use this language in your environment, particularly when you're talking about yourself. So let me give you an example. Suppose somebody has given you the feedback, well, Victor, I don't think you're analytical enough. I don't think you have the horsepower. You're not quantitatively equipped to do this job. How do you make them think differently about you? So you find yourself in a meeting and you say, well, I am really all about the numbers. I understand the narrative, but let's talk about what the numbers are going to say, because the numbers don't lie. Or explain that to me again. Talk to me. Explain it in a way that you're talking about the numbers, because, that's the only way I process things is through a quantitative lens. Or, my analysis around this is contingent upon three hypotheses. You see what I'm doing? Yeah. I'm speaking in a quantitative way. I'm talking about myself in the meetings in front of my colleagues, and then I'm backing it up with my behavior. The more you do that, they will start to think about you in that way. So when you are not in the room, people say, oh man, he's a numbers geek. Oh man, he's very quantitative. No, he's really strong analytically. So you better make sure the numbers are right. And it's because your behavior has been consistent. And it doesn't matter what it is. If you want them to think of you as a team player, then you make sure that you're giving attaboys and attagirls in the meeting and say, yes, go team. It's all about the way we can work this together. Let us go and get blah, blah. So you can train people to think about you and talk about you in the way that you want them. And that's what I learned from acquiring the pearl around perception is the co-pilot to reality. How people perceive you will directly impact how they deal with you.
That's amazing wisdom, and I hope our audience have their notepads out and they're taking some notes here, as well as getting the books, because the information is readily available. But what you just spoke can advance a career tremendously if you follow that pathway. And you mentioned a few times, being smart, right? Mm-hmm. And in our community, we're constantly told we have to work 10 times as hard just to get just as much. You have to be 10 times as smart. What are your thoughts on that statement?
Yeah, I'll tell you, I've given a lot of reflection on that, especially over the last couple of years. And I do think that mentality, and I understand why our parents and our grandparents told us that, because they did grow up in a very different environment where, discrimination and racism were prevalent and they were executed upon. Well, I'd like to say that we are in a different environment now. I'm not saying that is perfect. I'm far from saying that, but I am saying that it is a very different environment. So we have to be careful about our mentality, right? I would argue that you don't have to work 10 times as hard, or you don't have to produce twice as much, but you do have to have the language to make sure that you are getting your due. So, for example, if you feel like you're doing 4 times the work as everyone else, then you should be asking yourself, why are you doing that? Did anybody ask you to do that? Or did you take that upon yourself because you thought that that was something that you needed to do? And if it is the fact that you are doing 4 times as much and you're not getting as much, now you need to be able to have the conversation with whoever the boss is. And, we're going to call him Stanley, for lack of a better word, a name right now. We're going to call him Stanley. So you go to him and you say, Stanley, I need to have a conversation with you about equity, because something seems a little, inequitable in the environment. I'm doing A, B, C, D, and E, and I'm at the same level as some of my colleagues. Now, I'm not talking about anybody else, but, the fact that my volume is 5 times as much or 4 times as much as somebody else's, and my perception is that my pay is not even at their level, just based on some of the conversations that are here in the marketplace. I need to talk about that so that, we can have a level of equity here. And I'm not going to go by hearsay, because you're the boss. I'm going to ask you to have the review with HR. And if you don't feel comfortable having the review with HR, I'm more than happy to do that myself. I don't want to pollute you, but we need to have a conversation, because I just need to make sure that I am being appropriately compensated for my level of contribution. That's the script, Victor, right? And so often we don't have that conversation because we don't know how to approach that conversation, or we're afraid to approach that conversation. Or if Stanley's a little bit of a bully and he doesn't think you really mean what you say, and he just, pushes on you a little bit, then in fact, you'll be quiet again. But it is your right and your responsibility to make sure that you are being compensated at the level that you are contributing. And here's the deal: being quiet and not saying anything for fear of holding on to your job, well, it makes you vulnerable anyway. Because anytime they want to fire you, they can anyway. And oh, by the way, every day that you sit in a role where you're making less than you should, then you're handicapping yourself and your family. It's impacting your wealth, it's impacting your living. And there are other people, if you're that good, that would be more than willing to compensate you at the market level. Here's another thing that I want to say about that, Victor. Every seat has a market value. Every seat. I don't care whether you're working at State Farm, Morgan Stanley, McDonald's, Burger King, Chick-fil-A. Every seat, meaning every role, every job, has a market value. 20 years ago, I would argue it was hard to figure out the market value of the seat. The information wasn't readily available. That information is out there now. If you are in a corporate role, you can go to Glassdoor, you can go to Mercer.com, you can go to salary.com, and you can put in different specs so you can get the bookends of the compensation, meaning what's kind of at the low end of what people get paid for that role, what's the high end for people that get paid at that role. And yeah, there's some nuances maybe around education level. There's certain jobs that you have to have where you need that piece of paper, where you need that certification. But there are a lot of people that are in roles that, because they contribute so well, they may not have that certification. They may not have, that particular, degree. But if you are in an environment where the degree is required to even compete, then go get the degree, right? But do your homework, because so often we are underpaid, because when we are interviewing for a role, we don't know what the bands are. So when someone gives us an offer, we take it. And we don't know whether it's below, whether it's above, and usually it's not above, right. But we don't know how far below it is. And here's another thing that you should understand. When you take an offer that is below market, it is really hard to catch up once you're in that organization, because you hear things like, oh, well, you know, the average increase this year was 5%. And I know that you're 35% below where you should be, but I can't catch you all up in the 1 year, right? We just haven't done that. There's no precedence of doing that. And in most cases, it is hard to get a 35% jump when everybody else has gotten a 5, but you should be pushing hard for a 15 so that the next year they can give you another 15, right?
Yeah,
So,
yes, definitely.
you want to be really thoughtful about those kinds of things, but more importantly, have the language, or have somebody that you can go to that can help you with the language around having some of those conversations, because it's the rare case where the organization is going to come to you and say, Victor, we've been looking at your conversation and you're 35% behind where you should be. Because if you think about it from a business perspective, it's worth it all day long for them if they can, you know, if they could have you do the job that you're doing and pay you less. I, you know, I would say they don't necessarily do it on purpose, but it helps the margins.
Yeah, exactly. And I love the framing of the conversation around equity. I know it's a challenge for all people to go into a room and talk about salary, but I think when
Anybody.
you can frame it around equity and bring the data to support your case, it really provides at least an avenue for support.
That's
Uh,
right.
I have seen just in my many walks of experience that with us in particular, with African Americans, with minorities, we're definitely challenged in going into the room to have that conversation. And sometimes we feel like we're blessed just to be present, right? You just gave us so many keys and so many nuggets to assist us in that pathway. So again, it's my desire that our viewers today are really taking in those nuggets and that wisdom. And to your point, finding others that can help support them in crafting the language that will allow them to advance their career. Because yes, it is a challenge once you accept that low offer. It's a challenge to get it up.
Absolutely.
So um, when I think about you, and you mentioned there were other women before you at Morgan Stanley, but not that got to the heights that you've gotten to, and you stood on the shoulders of giants to kind of help you prepare your career. What do you think it was, or how did you push through the glass ceilings of Wall Street?
hmm Well, again, going back to how do you reframe it? I refuse to believe that there was really a glass ceiling. So part of it was kind of understanding what was actually going on at those levels. And one of the things that I realized, and this is a gross generalization, frankly, Victor, is that women in particular would invest in what I call the performance currency, making sure that the work was right, it was impeccable, it was beyond reproach. And sometimes as they got more senior, investing in the performance currency to the exclusion of the relationship currency. And let me talk about those two pieces. There are two types of currency in any environment: performance currency and relationship currency. Performance currency is the currency that is generated by your delivering that which was asked of you and a little bit extra. Every time that you deliver above someone's expectations, you generate performance currency. It works like the stock market. Anytime a company says to the street that they will deliver 25 cents a share and that company delivers 40 cents a share, that stock goes up every single time. And so will yours. Performance currency early on in your career and early on in any new environment, it's valuable for three reasons. Number one, it gets you noticed. It creates a reputation for you. Everybody says, oh, he's really good, or he can kill it, right? Number two, it will get you paid and promoted. But number three, over time, it may attract a sponsor. And as you know, Victor, the sponsor is the most valuable relationship that you will have in your career, because that's the person that's carrying your paper into the room. That's the person that behind closed doors is going to argue that you get the promotion, you get the great bonus, that you get the next great opportunity. And when you have great performance currency, it heightens the probability that somebody will take you under their wing and say, I'm going to make it happen for you, Victor. Or if you have to ask somebody to be your sponsor, if you have great performance currency in that environment, it heightens the probability that they will answer in the affirmative. They'll give you a yes, right? But over time, performance currency, as I would argue, is worth about $1.50 in the beginning. But over time, it starts to experience diminishing marginal returns. That buck 50 now becomes a dollar because now you've established a new standard of excellence. Everybody knows that you will do a great job. Everybody expects that you will always deliver. So there's no longer the premium associated with your deliverable. The currency that's now most important is the relationship currency. And relationship currency, I like to say, is worth 225, and it never experiences any diminishing marginal returns. Relationship currency is the currency that is generated by the investments that you make in the people in your environment. None of us work in a silo anymore. We're all working in highly interdependent environments. So, at a minimum, you need to have a relationship with every seat that touches your seat. If the only person that knows that you're doing a great job is your boss, then your ability to ascend is going to be vulnerable. Why? That person may leave the organization. They may lose their seat at the decision making table, or they may lose their juice. So it's your job to make sure as many people as possible in that organization is aware of your outside contribution. But here's why relationship currency is so very valuable. Your ability to move up in any environment will be a function of somebody's judgment. Judgment about whether or not you're ready, judgment about whether or not the team will follow you, and judgment about whether or not you will ultimately be successful. And I will tell you that judgments are directly influenced by relationships. So it's important that you invest in those relationships. And one of the reasons that I think more women don't get through that glass ceiling, or people of color, is that they're so focused on the performance that they don't spend the time investing in those relationships. And if people don't know you, when your name is called behind closed doors, when they're trying to make that decision, if nobody in that room knows you well enough to spend some of their personal currency on you, they go to the next name on the list. And it has absolutely nothing to do with your ability to do the job, but everything to do with whether or not somebody in that room can say, "Oh, Victor, absolutely, it's his turn. We ought to give him this shot." Or, "Victor, he's the most creative person that we have. If he can't figure out a solution, then there's not one to be had." Or, "Victor, our best relationship guy, he's the one to give that tough client to. He'll crack the code in that relationship." Notice there were no numbers. "Oh, Victor's a 10, Victor's a 9, Victor's a 8. All qualitative comments about you behind closed doors. And somebody else is making those comments because you're not in that room. And here's another thing that I want to say to the audience. Every critical decision about your career will be made behind closed doors in a room where you are not present. Your compensation will be decided behind closed doors. Your promotions will be decided behind closed doors. The new assignments that you get will be decided in a room behind closed doors where you are not present. So somebody has to be in that room carrying your paper, pounding the table, arguing on your behalf that you ought to get it, whatever it happens to be.
Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. And if you heard the beginning of this talk when I said she's amazing, Ms. Harris, at breaking down complex topics to make it simple, this is exactly what I'm talking about. We just got a financial education and a relationship building education all molded into one. That was outstanding, outstanding advice there. In your
Thank you.
journey, so you've done so much. You've done so much. In your journey, were there sacrifices you felt you had to make to stay the course you set?
Yeah, I will tell you, I have been asked that question a bunch, Victor, and I don't feel like I made any sacrifices. My mother was a great role model that made me believe that as a woman, I could have it all. That's why when I hear senior executive women say, "Oh, you can't have it all," or "It's a myth," or "You can have it all, but you can't have it all at the same time," I cringe because I feel like we're sending the wrong message to other young women who have aspirations to get to the top and to lead. I think the key to having it all is really defining what success looks like for you and how you want to do it. There is no playbook that says you got to have kids by the time you're 28 or you're 30. The biological clock is real, but there's a lot of different ways to be a mother, for example. Nobody says you have to, do these things once you're married in your household. It's you and your husband or you and your partner that decides who's going to take out the garbage or who's going to do the laundry or who's going to cook. Don't confine yourself to societal definitions of what those roles ought to be. So really defining in your own life, personally and professionally, what's important and marching to the beat of that drum is the way that I think you can have it all in a way that is satisfying and in a way that you define success. So I look back and, there's so many things, Victor, that I have done that I didn't even have on the list to do. If you had told me I would do 5 sold out concerts at Carnegie Hall and 2 sold out concerts at the Apollo, I would have said that's a possibility because I knew I wanted to sing. But if you had said, oh, you will record and distribute 4 albums, that you would be seen as, you would create a lab within a place like Morgan Stanley where it would be awarded one of the top 20 fintech labs in the world, I wouldn't have seen that. If you had said you're going to win a Webby, which is the Grammy of the podcast world, which you can see right there, I
Yeah.
wouldn't have seen that. I could barely spell podcast in 2018, let alone get a Webby 3 years later, right? And so there have been so many things that have happened. So I think the key is having a plan, having goals, but also having a measure of flexibility so that you might have seen your path going this way and then to the left, but it might turn out that the path goes right up, and then left. But it gives you so many lessons, so many learnings that allow you to be successful every time you get to another level. So no, I would tell you, I don't feel like I've made any sacrifices. I have a great family. I had children in my life much later, but I would argue that I'm a much better mother today at the age that I am now than I would have been at 35. And certainly than I would have been at 25. No ifs, ands, and buts about it, right? So your life will unfold as you allow it to divinely unfold, right? But every time you find yourself in a spot, say, well, what am I supposed to get out of this moment? What am I supposed to learn here? It feels like it's taken a long time for me to do this, but am I doing everything that I can? If the answer is yes, but you're still sort of treading water, then you say, there's got to be something else I'm supposed to learn from this spot that's going to help me to be successful in the next spot. So as long as I am fully prosecuting everything that's in my power, I'm articulating my voice, I'm asking for the opportunity. If I'm doing everything, then that means it's just timing. I got to make sure that everything lines up for me so that when I get to this next spot, I can knock that out of the park too.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Then you mentioned Carnegie Hall, you mentioned the Apollo and your albums, being a Wall Street force as well as an accomplished musician and singer. Have those worlds ever collided?
No, because Victor, I made a decision very early on that I definitely wanted to sing and that I would evaluate over time if I ever wanted to leave Wall Street to become a full-time singer. So while I could sing, I could record, I could perform, the decision that I made was that I wasn't going to be a touring artist,
Okay.
right? Because if I was going to be successful as a banker, I had to be real clear that the banking came first. If there was a client that needed to do a call, if there was a deal that needed to happen, everything else had to drop. I had to do that. That was the decision that I made when I made the decision to be a successful investment banker. So that's what goes with that. So that means as a singer, I had to prosecute that differently, right? So if I wanted to record, okay, well, I'm not signed with Sony or Warner or any of the big record companies, but I can produce my own, right? Because Carla the banker could finance Carla the singer, right? And that's kind of how I did it.
Have you ever had any situations where a client or someone else within Morgan Stanley even identified you from singing versus your financial background?
Oh, sure. In fact, I would tell clients about it. And if I didn't tell them, my colleagues definitely told them, "Oh, you ought to hear Carla. She's an amazing singer." So, there was a time when I was, regularly singing at our closing dinners, when we were successfully celebrating a deal that, had done really well. And somebody might say, "Oh, can you belt out a tune or give us a line or it's the CEO's birthday." And I would have no issue with singing a happy birthday because people would say, "Oh, you're doing the singing." I'm like, "Yeah, but wait a minute. That is something that's differentiated. right? It's not taken away from Carla the banker. Was it killing me to sing happy birthday? Now, I also was careful if I thought somebody was sort of taking advantage of it, or if they were trying to discount my intellect or my ability as a banker and trying to play up the singing part. Now, I'd be very careful about that and say, I'm not here to sing and dance, boys. Let's not get it twisted. Maybe you'll earn the right to hear me sing, but let's talk about this deal.
There you go. Awesome, awesome. And there's no way we can have this conversation without wrapping in a bit around investing. And I think this one is a bit more personal for me because, and we'll have a few questions on this. But one thing I observed as a youngster, my mom, she would play the lottery religiously, right? And we were PO. We didn't have enough money to say we're poor, right? And with that, uh, day after day, she would invest her dollar or more in getting lottery tickets, hoping that it would allow
Mm,
us to get out of the situation we were in. Um, Time after time, I seen that we would go without bread, just the necessities of life, right? And it seems though that many of us, especially in our community, whether it's playing the physical lottery or just the lottery of life, we're not intentional
mm.
about what we do with our finances. We're not intentional about educating ourselves in finances. And BDPA, we're an organization that exposes youth and adults to advancing in IT. But I just want to hear your thoughts around investing, finances. How do we really change our family dynamic in it not having to be the lottery?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question, Victor. And I have to tell you, and let me just, demystify things. The people that you see in the marketplace that are rich, outside of those who have inherited wealth, there have been no mystery as to how they got rich. Maximizing what you're making, understanding the difference between your needs and your wants, and investing that money and investing it early. And, unfortunately, Victor, many of us do not come from families where that's been carried out generation to generation so that we have a mentality around it. And certainly in our communities, and certainly when I was growing up, and even in my own household, the measure of being rich, a lot of it was wearing it on the outside, right? Are you driving a Cadillac? My mother used to joke that she saw more Cadillacs in the projects than she saw in neighborhoods and people's homes, right? And listen, again, my family was the same. My father drove a Cadillac my entire life, right? Um, but when you don't know better, you don't necessarily do better. But as the great Maya Angelou said, when you know better, you do better. And we have to get into a mentality if we want to create wealth for our families and then create generational wealth. We got to do three things. Number one, we do have to separate the difference between the needs and the wants and get into a rhythm of pay, if you're spiritual, make sure you pay him first through your tithes, pay yourself, pay your bills, and then save. All right. And put that money away because there is going to be a rainy day. And when you save, after you get a certain amount of money, then you want to start thinking about investing that money. And I won't go into a whole lesson here, but whether you invested in a mutual fund, whether you invested in stocks, whether you invested in bonds, but have money that is making money for you. And if you don't invest it in some of those instruments, invest it in houses. You see all these people, I'm sure people on this call are getting calls all the time. We buy ugly houses. You see all those signs, around Jacksonville. Well, what are these folks doing? They're going in, buying these homes at a fraction of the value, making an investment to bring them up to code or bring them up to specs, and then selling them for a multiple, meaning 2x, 3x for what they bought them for. That's a return on that investment. So they paid 60, they put 30 in it. So the value of the investment is 90, but they sell it for 180 or they sell it for 270. That's 3x. And they bank and invest, that profit and buy more houses to do it again. That is how you start to build. You don't go and buy, an $850 Louis Vuitton bag so everybody can see you got this Louis Vuitton bag, or buy a 900, and I'm just speaking about the women, right? You don't buy a $900 pair of Christian Louboutins so you can have the red bottoms. You know, I used to look at some of my classmates that I went to Bishop Kenny with that I knew were very well off. They were coming to school in a Toyota, you know, a 10-year-old Toyota at that, you know, and I'm in a two-year-old Eldorado, you know, so what's, you know, there's a mismatch, right? So we have to think differently about money. So that's the first thing. Know the difference between the needs and the wants. The second is to invest it, right? And if you don't know about investing, you can use your network and start talking to people so that you can learn, you can read. You know, you can pick up things, frankly, from CNBC and some of the financial channels, which weren't around when I was growing up. And the third thing is you have to be careful about how you help family. And this is a big one for us, right? Because if you are successful, it's easy for you to become the human ATM, right? And that's a very real thing for lots of families, whether you are of color or you're immigrants, right? And I understand that you want to help your family, and I'm certainly saying that you should help your family, but you got to make sure that you are really helping. And sometimes other people in your family make choices where they never have any money, but that's a choice that they made, right? And one of my friends really helped shift my mentality because she said, I am not going to be responsible for other people's choices. What happened that your lights are about to get cut off? What happened that they're about to put you out of your home? You know, those things you want to understand. And should I give you the money, Victor, or should I go to JEA and pay the light bill? Right. And then you and I have to talk about it. Right. So, you know, you got to really be careful about that because my mother, God bless her, she used to say, when you don't have, you can't get. So always make sure you have. Right. And that really, even when I didn't know a lot about investing, even if when I didn't know a lot about growing wealth, I knew that basic. And so what she was saying to me is keep some money, Carla, have your own. And my grandmother, the successful entrepreneur, I learned a lot from her. She would not put any money out when she didn't see it coming back in,
Mm.
which is why she invested in houses. And, you know, she didn't know a lot about stocks and bonds, but she was buying up houses and renting those houses out. So as she slept, she had her money making money.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So as we near the end, we only have a couple of more questions here. I wanted to get your view on two things: empowering others and failure.
Hmm. Yes. So the way that you grow your power is to give it away. So when you find yourself in a position where you are running things, try to empower the other people who are working with you. Try to think about who you can prepare to take your job. Because here's something, if you're the only person in the whole organization that can do that job, guess what? You're the only person in that whole organization that can do that job, which
Mhm.
means you will never move. And that was one of the most valuable lessons I learned on Wall Street is I watched those folks who were ahead of me, and they were guys, those guys who were ahead of me, when they were ready to move, they were preparing somebody to take their seat. Right. And so that is how they grew their power. When they had somebody who could take their seat, they could move to the next seat. Right.
Mhm.
So, you know, empowering other people is really important. If you're just holding on to the power, you're not going to grow and you're not going to ascend. And what was the last one, Victor? The other question?
Your view on failure.
The view on failure. Yes. Failure always brings you a gift. And that gift is called experience. Now you know how to do it better. Now you know how to do it differently. Now you know how to do it successfully. It's not a big deal that you fail. Everybody fails. Everybody makes a mistake. But what is the big deal is how and if you get up. Did you learn something? So if you take a risk at work and it doesn't work out, you should be the first one to articulate that. Wow, you know, we tried that and it didn't work. But you know what? I'm glad we tried that because we learned A, B, C, and D. And now that's going to inform how we approach this the next time. And I think a much higher probability that we'll be successful the next time. You own the narrative. Never let anybody else talk about your failures before you do, because you give up your power.
Awesome. And to the audience, as you can see, my intro was not a fake hype. You have received an amazing amount of nuggets, or might I say, Carlos Pearls. You received a significant amount of information on today. Hopefully, you've jotted down some notes. If not, take an opportunity to rewatch, pause, jot down additional things that you can possibly do in whatever career pathway you've chosen. Ms. Harris, I thank you tremendously for spending this time with us. It's been an amazing hour here, just learning and growing from you through this time. You've given us many pearls already, but I just wanted to take an opportunity. Are there any closing remarks? Are there any things you'd like to share with the audience as we finish the chat?
You know, I think this is an amazing year in front of us, Victor, because nobody has the playbook on how things are supposed to transpire on the other side of a global pandemic. And this is the first time that we have had truly a globally shared experience, because there's not a person on the planet that hasn't been impacted by COVID-19 or that hasn't felt some kind of way on the back of the social unrest that we saw, especially in 2020. So take this as an opportunity to exercise your voice. Don't let somebody just dictate to you how things ought to go on the other side of this pandemic. You have an opportunity to contribute your perspective, your point of view on what might be done differently. Don't blow that opportunity. Somebody may still create the playbook and tell you, but don't lose the opportunity to contribute. Even if they don't take it, you should contribute. So this is what I call a blank sheet of paper moment where you have an opportunity to put your own imprimatur on your future. Go get them.
Awesome, awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for the time. We really value and respect all that you do. Looking forward to seeing what you do in the future.
I'll thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Have a great day.
You too.
Awesome. So I believe we hit everything we needed to hit for the day. Just in closing, for me, as I mentioned, Carla Harris is an amazing individual, very accomplished, not only within the investment space, but also as a musician, singer, author, has just done many amazing things in her life. We, of course, were truly blessed to have her join us today, and looking forward to further sessions and getting to chat with others, and contributing back to our space. Thank you all for joining us. Bye.